Welcome to the Cast Iron Strength Podcast, your go-to source for no-nonsense, straight-talking strength training and performance solutions that work. Now, introducing your host, Mark Keys.
Good morning, podcast listeners. Welcome to episode 121 of the Cast Iron Strength Podcast, brought to you by your sultry tones of your sexy host, Mark Keys. Today, we are answering the questions coming from the Your Strongest Year Facebook group, known as Stronger by the Day. If you aren't aware of these two projects of mine, and you are looking for some programming, I suggest strongly you check out www.yourstrongestyear.com, where I am publishing an entire year's worth of periodized strength training, mainly based around the power lifts. But if you're just interested in general strength training itself, you're not specifically looking to get into powerlifting, you're maybe just looking for a program that you're not going to stall out on, and a year's worth of training for absolutely butt-fuck nothing. Price of entry is $0, 0 cents, 0 yen, 0 Bitcoin, 0 Ethereum. It costs fuck all free, baby. Get yourself to www.yourstrongestyear.com. And also, do yourself a favor and get yourself onto the Stronger by the Day Facebook page. That's where I'm planning to cultivate my little group of freebie hunters, my little group of people who are on the program, and anyone that's looking for more regular updates, more interactive experience when it comes to strength training. So if you'd like to get some support, get your questions answered, and I do release quite a lot of content first into that group before it goes out into my Facebook page, castironstrength.com, or before it goes out onto the tubes. So the question comes from Rob By. He asks, my program calls for sets of 7 to 9 reps on some days and 3 to 5 on others. My technique is okay with lower reps, but falls apart a little while. I tend to break down with the higher rep sets into less reps and more sets in a strict time. Fuck that. My technique is okay with lower rep sets and higher volume of sets than high sets, time equated. Is it better to stick out high rep sets and try get better at them, or stick to reinforcement of proper technique provided the volume is done? Well, this, Rob, depends entirely on the intention of the program. Now, when we put together a program with someone in mind, it depends on where you're at. Obviously, if it's a template like Your Strongest Year, there is no sensitivity to where you are at. You have an entry point into the program, and then by the time you've went through block 2, 3, and 4, then I can make assumptions as to where you are at while following the program. But while I'm working with one of my lifters, one-to-one athletes, or someone that I program for on an individual basis, I go through a weekly process where I have a plan laid out where I'll say, right, this week's more of an intensity-led week, or this week we have a game on Wednesday and Saturday, so this is the general structure I'm going to utilize. But then we can pick up an adductor strain. The person could have a certain form issue I'm looking to go for. They may have a competition coming up. They might be entering into competition while still a bit under the weather. They might be a wee bit sick. There are lots of different variables that go to chop and change week to week for lifters, especially with amateur athletes, which tends to be the core demographic that any powerlifting coach or any private coach deals with. Tend to be amateur athletes. So there is a lot that can go wrong, or there's a lot that can happen in someone's life, like their holidays, weddings, so on and so forth. So it depends. Like as with always, everything is context driven, and it depends on your situation. Now, if we're looking at the question of volume and technique, this is something we can answer probably in a 3-part basis. So when I'm looking at someone's technique, the first thing I want to do is I want to establish a good practice. So I want to establish a good stable practice, so a good stable technique that they can replicate. There's not too much variability under their execution, up to a point. So with a skill such as kicking or throwing, we can put it under pressure by marking you. We can increase the distance. We can shout at you. Blah blah blah. There are many different ways in different skills of putting it on pressure. In lifting, which is obviously what we're talking about, we can put a skill under pressure. Again, many different ways. We can put it under pressure with tempo. We could put it under pressure with a pause or several pauses. We could put it under pressure by changing the orientation of the implement. So in a squat, we could put it overhead. We could put it in front of you. We can do a zombie. We could do a low bar. We could do a high bar. We could change the bar. We could change the implement. We could do safety bar. We could do cambered bar squat. We could do a box. We could do blah. We could do against bands. So we can change the nature of the skill. We can change the orientation of the bar. We can change the resistance. So we can use bands. We can use change bands. We can do it pausing on a rack. We could do it squatting against a rack. There are whole different ways we can change the context of the skill execution to put pressure on the skill. We can increase the load. We can increase the intensity of the skill. That will put the skill under pressure. Or we can induce or increase fatigue. So we can do more reps. So we can say, for instance, do sets of 10. And we know that your technique, due to the fatigue, is probably going to start breaking down, depending on the intensity, is going to start breaking down at around, say, rep 6. And then we can give you ways of dealing with that. We can give you ways of trying to work around that. So we can give you a pacing strategy. We can say, okay, so it's 10 rep set, so I want you to get to 5 as quick as you can. Then I want you to take a break, and then I want you to do 2, and I want you to take a break. Then I want you to do 2. And then I want you to take a break, and I want you to do 1. Or you can do clusters where you physically put the bar back in, take a 10-second break, and then go again. So there are different mechanisms that we can utilize to help you do the heavier reps, but try to maintain technique. But then that might not be the goal of the program. The goal of the program might be to take your skill and put it under pressure with high rep, high volume, high fatigue. So for instance, a fatigue inducing protocol that we can utilize for the back squat is we can do front squat into back squat. So we can do, say, a set of 6 front squat straight into a set of 8 back squat, and the front squat is maybe loaded up with something around 60% of your back squat. And we can utilize that to fatigue your legs. So then it becomes more difficult. You need to think a bit more about trunk control. Timing changes a little bit to change the context of the skill. So it does depend totally on the context of the program, because in some instances, we basically want your form to break down in training at different stages in different ways. Because if we're not having your form, if your form isn't breaking down, or if your technique is not being challenged, then you're not engaging in what is known as deliberate practice. Is it deliberate practice? Let me just pause a second. So deliberate practice is basically a form of practice where we put the skill in different contexts, we put it under pressure, and we actively review at every juncture. So when we do a set where we video it, we have a coach, you have a lifting partner, we critically appraise what's happened, we break down where things have went wrong, and then we think of solutions, or we think of ways of doing it better next time. For practice to be deliberate, you need to move out of your comfort zone. So when lifting weights, moving out of your comfort zone, again, we can say, can be done from changing the exercise variation, changing the implement, changing the nature of it, putting the tempo into it. Or it can be done simply by doing more reps, so inducing fatigue. Or it can be done with more weight, inducing an intensity overload. So if we don't have breakdown within the program, or we don't have breakdown within your training, there's nothing to critically appraise. So you get to a point where you get someone, let's say for instance, someone is new and we just let them master a weight. So we let them squat 40, and they can squat 40 beautifully with great technique. We let them do that for a year. And they have the most beautiful looking squat we've ever seen. But then we go to 50 kilos. And it's still okay. It's fine. We go to 60 and there's a force leakage, there's a bit of a problem. Okay, we'll stick at 60 now and then we'll master 60. And then we'll move up slowly like this. So this is an extreme example, but in microcosm, this is taken to the absurd. People who think your technique should be good all of the time. What you should be doing all of the time is thinking about, appraising, critically looking at video, reviewing, trying to make your technique perfect all of the time. But by no means should your technique be perfect all of the time, because if your technique is perfect all of the time, then you are not putting it under pressure. You're not putting the skill under pressure, and by not putting the skill under pressure, you're not practicing deliberately, and thus you will not progress anywhere close to the speed you could do if you engage in deliberate practice, where you push out of your comfort zone, you review, you critically appraise, you're constantly trying to improve, utilizing different mechanisms, utilizing feedback, utilizing different eyeballs. The example of what would be good critical, or what would be good deliberate practice, would be someone who has worked with a coach to a point, and they know that they have outgrown that coach's skill set. That coach is, say it's their first coach, and they have a really good relationship. They've done really well together, but it's got to 2 or 3 years down the line, and the athlete is pretty much sure that the coach doesn't really have much more for them, or doesn't have much more to give them. A good point of deliberate practice, or a good point of performance behavior, would be the coach and the athlete understanding they've come to that juncture, and then for them, the athlete, to move on to a coach who has the skill set they require. They should basically go to the best coach that they can afford or logistically get to. Someone who wants to get better, someone who has a deliberate practice mindset will do that. It's something that I have done myself in the last couple of years, specifically with weightlifting clients. I have a certain skill set within coaching weightlifting. I say I was a competent weightlifting coach, but there are coaches in Edinburgh who are better than me. So when athletes have discussed, or athletes or lifters have discussed going towards a coach with a better skill set, it is something that I have actively encouraged them to do, because it's the right thing for them to do to become a better lifter. And at the end of the day, as the coach, that's what I want to see. I want to see my lifters get better. I want to see them improving. And as a lifter, that's undoubtedly what you want to see as well. So when it comes to looking at your technique, should it break down? Yes, it should. Should you be reviewing constantly? Yes. You should be constantly trying to make it better. So I guess the answer to the question is, do the higher rep sets, video them, and see where you're breaking down. Ask on opinions where you're breaking down. And then try to find strategies, try to find cues, so that when you're back in that situation where you're on rep 8 and you're fucked, and you know your knees are going to cave, you have a cue or you have a strategy to try and help offset that happening. Because overcoming that knee cave on rep 8, 9, and 10, that is the practice. They are the reps that when it comes to 1RMs, when it comes to maxing, those are the cues that are going to help you break past whatever the technical breakdown is that's blocking your progress up at higher weights. So again, that's pretty much the answer to it. Again, it's context specific. There are times when we want, so for instance, if we're starting a new block, we're starting a new program, there are times when I want your practice to be as close to perfect as we can. So we deliberately will reduce the intensity. We'll make sure everything's done as well as possible. You'll utilize drills to help that be reinforced. But that's only to set up momentum. That's just to set up good practice. Then you're going to get that practice under fire. And your form's going to break down. And I fully expect your form to break down. I actively want your form to break down. I'm going to push and try to make your form break down. And then when your form breaks down, that's where the learning happens. That's where progress happens. That's when we're going to discover where the leakages are. That's where we're going to discover where the problems are. And from there, then we can come to solutions. We can come to furthering you. So this is the difference between just a program and coaching. Coaching involves a lot more cogs and involves a lot more skill sets than just putting together a program. Anyone can put shit together on a spreadsheet. It takes a coach to make the spreadsheet work better than what the athlete can make work better themselves. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. I'm not going to edit that. I'll just leave it. My name is Marquise. You are listening to the Cast Iron Strength podcast, which is hopefully going to be a Monday to Friday podcast going on in the future. If you want to ask me any questions, you can join the Stronger by the Day group on Facebook. Just search for Stronger by the Day. You can slide up into my DMs on Instagram or Facebook at Cast Iron Strength. Or you can shoot me an email at Marquise, MARCKEYS @gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you tomorrow for your next installment of the Cast Iron Strength podcast. Thank you.